Hello, Year 10. I'm just going to use this video to give you some feedback on the answers to the 9 markers that you submitted yesterday. So, there were 2 9 markers that people had to go at. One of them was evaluate the effectiveness of an urban transport scheme you've studied, and that's the one that we're going to go through first. Right, just pause me, take a look through the answer that's on the screen. Okay. This answer's got a really good structure. They're clearly answering the question. They're saying that one positive effect of the Boris spikes, and they've explained that. So they've got a clear point, and they've clearly explained it. What they need to do to improve is be a bit more specific. So if you're talking about air pollution, name the air pollutant that you need to talk about. So it's diesel particulates, in particular from cars, that cause problems. Nitrous oxide is also a gas emitted by cars that cause problems. Here, they've made the argument that if there's air pollution, habitats are destroyed. Air pollution does have a negative impact on the environment. It can cause damage to animals, but if you're talking about air pollution, the easiest argument to make is that if there is an increase in air pollution, people get respiratory illnesses such as asthma, and that leads to a decrease in life expectancy. And you can even say that people who are most likely to be affected are going to be poor children. Do you see how if you talk about the social effects, the health impacts of air pollution, you can make your argument sound much more sophisticated and more specific. So when you're writing your paragraphs, spend a bit of time thinking, yes, I know lots about this topic. All of you know lots about urban sustainability and transport. What you've got to work on now is selecting the parts of your knowledge to talk about that are going to best show how good a geographer you are. Linking into that, you have 3 things that you could potentially talk about for this 9 marker. Evaluate the effectiveness of urban transport schemes. So we've studied transport in London. And we looked at the congestion charge, we looked at London's integrated transport system, and we looked at Boris bikes. Lots of people planned and wrote paragraphs on the congestion charge. The congestion charge is quite tricky to argue and to make your argument sophisticated. It would have been easier to talk about the integrated transport system. Now, the integrated transport system sounds really complicated, but all it is that the tube, the underground, links up with the overground trains, which link up with the buses. And you can go on all of those with one Oyster card. You tap in with the Oyster card when you go onto the public transport, and it automatically charges you. That reduces queues, meaning that the public transport is quicker than taking a car, which could get stuck in traffic congestion, which makes it really popular. 40% of Londoners use the integrated transport system. So can you see how that, in that really simple argument, just about how the Oyster card is useful, I've shown specific knowledge and I've given explanation. Whereas with the congestion charge, it's a bit harder. Let's look at how we would do it with the congestion charge. Okay, so here's an answer that's talking about the congestion charge. This answer shows brilliant specific knowledge. They've said how much cars get fined if they enter the congestion zone. So just to recap, London has a congestion charge. That means if you drive into the centre of London at specific times of day, you get charged. And as this answer is identified here, you get charged between £10.50 and £14 depending on the vehicle that you're driving. The idea is that by charging people to go into the centre, people are less likely to drive in their cars and instead they'll take public transport. And that's going to reduce traffic congestion. So, the argument that's made in this paragraph is that congestion charge is negative because people have to pay to go into the centre. Right, let's make that explanation a bit more sophisticated, a bit more geographical. Be more specific. Who is it going to be a problem for paying to get into the centre of London? Well, we know that certain areas of London have large amounts of poverty. So the people who are going to be impacted most by the congestion charge are going to be poorer individuals, people on low incomes, who might be unable to afford to drive into the centre of London. But wait a minute. If you're a poor individual, you're on a really low income, are you going to be able to afford to have a car? Well, no. What we find is that in London, most people on low incomes don't have a car, they use London's buses. So, who's the congestion charge really affecting? Well, we also know that London is the UK's financial capital, and that in the city of London, there are lots of people working in businesses, banks, to do with finance that earn large amounts of money. The highest incomes in the UK are in London. So, well, this answer's been specific and said that it costs between £10 and £14 to go into the centre of London. If you're a banker and you're earning, let's say 50 grand a year, 100 grand a year, is £10 going to matter to you? Not really. I mean, you might even be driving a Lamborghini into the centre of London. So the congestion charge is not effective because the people who drive in the centre of London have very high incomes, and those people can afford to pay the congestion charge like it's spare change. So what we've done there, by being specific about who the congestion charge is going to affect, we've raised that answer up a level. But it all comes back to your choice of what you talk about, because talking about the congestion charge, you have to think a lot harder about the issue than if you're talking about integrated transport system. Okay, the other 9 marker that some people had to go at was this one. Using figure 4 and your own knowledge, to what extent will the Northwest Bicester development enable more sustainable living? And this is a really tricky question because you've not only got to use your own knowledge, but you've got to use the figure as well, and the figure had a lot of information on it. These were 100% better than the last attempt that we had on this. I'm really impressed about how you've taken on feedback and how you've taken apart the figures now. I'm just going to talk you through what I liked about your answers and the areas that we can improve for this question. Right. Remember that sustainability is a compromise between social, environmental, and economic impacts. So in an ideal world, anything that you do, any new development, any transport system, you want it to have positive impacts socially, environmentally, and economically. A positive social impact might be something that, like, it improves people's health, it improves people's education, it improves people's community. And a positive environmental impact, that might be providing habitats, preventing climate change, reducing emissions, reducing energy use, reducing waste. Positive economic impacts, that might be providing jobs for lots of different types of people, helping raise people's incomes, providing affordable housing. Oh, wait a minute, let me just stop myself there. Housing, affordable housing, would come in this zone here, between the blue and the yellow, economic and social. So housing is something that's to do with people, it's social, but when you start linking it to people's incomes, it comes just in between economic and social. Like lots of things in geography, there's not necessarily clear-cut boundaries. Right, so we're looking for that sustainability. We want positive social, economic, and environmental impacts. And you were given a series of information about the new development in Bicester. So your first paragraph had to use some of that information. One of the ways that people use the information was say that, taking from the figure, the new development is going to have cycle links to the train station and to the centre of town. Cycle links are positive and sustainable because they increase people's health. They reduce the risk of obesity and heart disease, which leads to an increased life expectancy. If people have an increased life expectancy, they're going to put less strain on hospital services in the NHS. And that's the argument this paragraph made. Just pause me while you have a read through the paragraph on the screen. Right, what I really liked about this paragraph is that it's got one clear point, and they've explained that point well. The best part of it is that there is specific knowledge throughout the explanation. So this paragraph, if you had two paragraphs like this, you are heading towards that 7, 8, 9 out of 9 that we're all aiming for. Let's have a look at the specific knowledge that they've used. So they've used specific knowledge from the figure. They said there's going to be cycle networks. They've named a specific disease, cardiovascular disease, heart disease. They're using a specific geographical terminology, geographical words like life expectancy. So when you're being specific, don't always think that you have to include a number, a percentage, a fact. It can just be names and showing off your geographical vocabulary. They've also got an extended explanation. You can see in green I've highlighted where they've explained, and it is twice as long as their point. That is exactly what I want to see. You get the most credit for your explanation. And within that, they've used sophisticated vocabulary, including connectives like therefore, this causes, and this enables. So this is a really strong paragraph here. Another point that you could have taken from the figure was that the new development has solar panels. Solar panels are positive because they prevent the need for using fossil fuels for energy like coal and gas. Now we know that coal and gas are a problem because they, when they're burnt, they release carbon dioxide. And that is causing the enhanced greenhouse effect, where carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are trapping in the Earth's radiation, leading to an increase in temperature. And here's what it looks like in a paragraph. Just take a minute to read through that paragraph now. Right, so again, I really like this paragraph. It's got a clear point. It's taken knowledge from the figure. It's said that they're using solar panels. And it's showing specific knowledge throughout. Again, they've used names like coal and gas and the enhanced greenhouse effect. I can really see that this person knows their geography. The explanation is twice the length of the point, so we can see that they've explained it. Each sentence explains the last sentence. Although at the end, they could have briefly explained the negative impacts of the enhanced greenhouse effect. So we know that the enhanced greenhouse effect causes the Earth's average temperature to increase, which leads to an increase in extreme weather like flooding and heat waves. One of the things that both these paragraphs could do to improve is answer the question in the first sentence more directly. It's just a niggly tweak, but if you make it really obvious that you're answering the question. So rather than saying one reason why, you need to say to what extent you think it's development. You think the development will enable more sustainable living. So rather than saying one reason why Northwest Bicester could be seen as environmentally friendly, you could say, to some extent, I think the Northwest Bicester development is sustainable because it is environmentally friendly. Look, we can see the same in this answer here. Rather than saying one way, I think to some extent the Northwest Bicester development is sustainable because it will have cycle networks. And that would just really show that you're answering the question. Right. This paragraph here is really interesting because it's got loads of great geography in it. In fact, this answer shows more thought than the previous two. There is so much geography in here that has been really deeply thought about. But if you write a paragraph like this in the exam, you won't get as many marks. And that's because you've shown lots of really important geographical points, but you've only got a small explanation. And we can see it here. When I look at the balance between green, the explanation, and purple, the points, we've got double the amount of points as we have explanation. And we want that to be the other way around. We will need double the amount of explanation to points. But I want to look at some of these points and just expand them. Think about how we can make them into a paragraph, because they are really interesting points. So, the first point is that the houses won't be in the new development won't be affordable for less wealthy people. Okay, that's a great point. Let's expand that now. Therefore, those people are going to have to won't be able to move into the area. So what you'll get is a concentration of wealthy people in the new development, which isn't sustainable because that's not a mixed community. The second point here is about education, that less wealthy people will not be able to get the new jobs that the development provides. Let's expand that. We know that people who grow up in poverty are less likely to get educational qualifications. They don't score as well in their GCSEs as children from wealthier families. Therefore, they might be unable to get the new jobs that the development provides. That's a really sophisticated point, because what you're saying is that it's not the creation of jobs that matters. We need to think about who's going to be able to get those jobs and what kind of jobs they're going to be. You can create lots of new low-paid jobs. But that's not as sustainable as creating more higher-paid jobs. Because we know that some people can have jobs, but still be in poverty because their jobs don't pay enough. There's another point here, that building any new development on greenfield lands will destroy habitats. So let's expand that, see how we could draw that out into a whole paragraph. So yes, Northwest Bicester is meant to be a new eco-friendly development. But if that is built on greenfield land that hasn't been built on before, then it's going to be destroying habitats. Habitats such as deciduous woodland, which will mean that there'll be an impact on species like thrushes, whose habitats will be lost, and the population of those species, the number of those species, is going to go down. So you could write a whole paragraph just on those 3 points that we've discussed. 3 different paragraphs, on those 3 different points. Right, and then you've brought up another point, which is again a great point, but we can expand it into a whole paragraph. Any new development might increase the number of cars on the road. So the Northwest Bicester development provided cycle networks. But we know that you can provide public transport for people. You can provide cycle networks, you can provide trains, undergrounds, but that doesn't mean that people are going to use it. And we looked at that super briefly when we looked at London. We read a study that said they're building new housing developments near train stations, but people are choosing to drive anyway. So if we apply that to Bicester, they're building new housing and they're providing cycle routes, but people are going to drive. If it's raining, people are going to drive. So there is likely to be traffic congestion on the roads. And that traffic congestion creates noise pollution, which has an impact on animals. An example of an animal we looked at was the European grey tree frog. And as this person has spoken about, the European grey frog can't mate because it can't hear the mating calls over the sound of the traffic, and that's causing the number of those frogs to decrease in areas with a lot of traffic. So just to summarise, Make sure you're specific throughout your explanation. I want names, I want specific geographical knowledge, facts if you have them. Make sure you're choosing one point and you're explaining it really well. And finally, think very carefully about what point you choose. There are lots of points that you can talk about, but you need to choose the point where you're going to be able to explain it the most specifically. Right, because the question is using figure 4 and your own knowledge, you then needed to write a paragraph that used your own knowledge. And the point that we were making here was that the housing in the new development in Bicester isn't affordable. And we know by studying the Olympic Park in London that when you don't provide enough affordable housing for people, people are forced out the area and they have to leave to cheaper areas. And this can result in urban sprawl because the cheapest areas tend to be on the outskirts of the cities. Just take a minute, pause me, and read through this paragraph. Okay. So what I like in this paragraph is that we got a really clear point. And they've linked their knowledge about London back to the Northwest Bicester development. And that's really clear at the end here. So they've talked about London in the first section of the paragraph. And then they've linked it back. So they said Northwest Bicester development also doesn't have affordable housing, just like the Olympic Park in London that they've talked about earlier. So urban sprawl may occur like it did in Newham. There is specific knowledge about London throughout this explanation. They've mentioned the Olympic Park, they've mentioned Newham. 2 named places, that's great. And there is explanation, explaining why not creating enough affordable housing means that people have to move. Just take a minute, read through this paragraph. So again, here we've got one clear point and it's well explained. There is a section in the middle of the explanation that I've highlighted in black that you don't really need. We could get rid of that and the argument would still make sense. So it could be a bit more concise. But there's lots of specific knowledge in here. Look, we're mentioning the Olympic Park development. We've said that it's in Newham. We've said that there's job opportunities such as Wembley Stadium. There are 2 slightly different points within this paragraph. One that is going to provide more jobs and one that is going to provide more houses. So if I'm being super picky, I'd say pick one of those and explain it really well. And what you've done in your answer is you actually pick one of those. You've explained about the jobs rather than the housing. Okay, take us a minute to read through this answer. So this answer's got a clear point and it's got a clear explanation as well. But this answer doesn't use their knowledge about London as effectively as the previous 2 answers. And that is just to do with structure. So what we're going to talk about now is how you can use a structure that will help you get those 9 out of 9 marks. Because I know that you've got the knowledge, it's just getting that knowledge down on the page in a way that you can write it down in the 10 minutes that you've got in the exam. Okay. You need to start off with one clear point. Only one. I know you know loads, but we just want one point. You then need to use your own knowledge. Then explain it, and explain it using specific knowledge throughout your paragraph. So here's one that I've written that could show you what this looks like, and the key is in the first point. Just take a minute to read through now. Right, notice in my first sentence, my sentence where I'm making my point, I've linked Northwest Bicester to London. However, to some extent, Northwest Bicester development will not be sustainable because it does not offer affordable housing. Then the most important sentence is the next one. This was shown to be a problem in the regeneration of the Olympic Park in London. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the figure and I'm linking the figure to something that I already know. So I know that affordable housing is a problem because I've studied the Olympic Park. And I've linked that back to Bicester. Then I've shown specific knowledge about the Olympic Park. So from this point onwards, it's just like writing a normal paragraph. I've shown my specific knowledge, I've used a fact in this case, and I've explained it using connectives like therefore, consequently, and so. In my explanation, I've got more specific knowledge such as names, like the name of the housing development in the Olympic Park, which was the Athletes' Village. So, to summarise, when you're doing a question where you've got to use the figure and your own knowledge, in your second paragraph, link what you know to the figure. And you can easily do that by saying, this was shown to be a problem in, and then you name your own case study. Your task now is to go back and green pen your work based off the feedback that I've given in this video. Thank you so much for sending in those answers. Keep sending me in any work that you're doing. I don't mind if it's a photo, if it's in an email, if it's a Word document. If you're using ePraise, we can now message on ePraise, so that's great. You can attach files in there. However you do it, keep sending me work in. It's really good to see, and I can see that you're taking on the feedback. And I know it's a bit difficult that we're not in the same room together, but I can see from the work that you've sent in today, compared to the work that we did last lesson, that you are making really important improvements. And your work is really good. I was reading through Year 11's exam papers during the holidays. And your writing, don't tell them this, don't tell Mr. Foster this, your writing is better than the Year 11. So you're in a really good place. We've just got to keep working on getting these specific details in. All right, thank you very much.